Hey y'all.
So, welcome everyone to the Great HR Debate. I'm Jessie Schofer, or as they say in formal debates, Madam Speaker, which is what everyone shall be calling me today. So, I'm quite excited for this. We've got 6 professionals here today, 6 experts who are going to be debating each other, and we're going to debate on the topic of pay for performance. So, we've got the proposition for pay for performance, and we have the opposition against pay for performance. This is going to get me going with the tongue twisting of pay for performance. And so we're going to have obviously 3 versus 3. We're going to rotate through. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But what we're going to do is firstly say thank you to our key sponsors for today. Firstly, we have Pave. Companies of all sizes trust Pave as their leading AI compensation platform with real-time data and end-to-end workflows covering everything from job pricing and pay ranges to merit cycles and total rewards. Our second sponsor for this wonderful event is Pando, which is a performance platform, and they believe how we do them is broken. Pando gives managers real-time context and proven frameworks to develop their teams continuously. And Shapes, they're our third sponsor. They get rid of your HR admin. They're an AI native people management platform transforming what they call people into people designers that enable them to surface insights before anyone asks and build automatic workflows at scale. So, how it's going to go is I'm going to introduce our wonderful fighters now. We have 2 teams, as I mentioned. One is Matt's team, who's fighting for pay for performance, and he is calling in from Australia very, very early, I think 5 a.m. So thank you, Matt, for giving us your all and dedication to your position and to fight for this. Alongside Matt, we have experts, Mark and Jessica, 3 people who believe in pay for performance. I want to see what they say to this because I'm very, very keen myself on their position. And in the other side, we have Kim. She's on the against team. She's got 2 other experts with her, Kim and James, who I think even wrote a book on this topic. So we definitely have the right people in this room. And these 3 believe that pay for performance is broken, outdated, and potentially maybe doing more harm than good. So we're going to hear their sides very, 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 very soon. How it's going to work is we have adapted real debate rules. We're going to have each speaker getting 6 minutes each. When the time is up, they will be cut off. They will have a 30-second timer to let them know that they've got 30 seconds left. And then we will alternate for to against, back and forth till we've gone through all the speakers and their positions. And at the end, the captains will recap with their closing statements to convince you who truly is the winner. And then, of course, you vote. And then we crown the winner. So round 1, Matt, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, and I'm going to set my timer right now so that you can kick off. Go for it.
All right, I better get cracking. So thank you for the intro. Look, I'm going to do something a little unusual for somebody arguing for pay for performance, and I'm actually going to start by telling you where it's broken. So I've spent plenty of time building compensation practices at startups and high growth tech companies. I've built pay bands, I've calibrated performance reviews, and I've sat in rooms where managers are fighting over ratings, and I've seen how badly things can go. Traditional merit-based pay for performance, the kind where a manager rates you on a scale, HR maybe runs a calibration or there isn't one, and you get a 3% bump or a 5% bump based on that rating, is obviously deeply flawed. It's prone to recency bias. It rewards the people who are most visible rather than necessarily the most impactful. And it can often amplify gender and ethnicity pay gaps through subjective assessments that feel objective because there's a number attached to them. I've personally seen calibration sessions where the loudest in the room wins the biggest increases for their team, not because their people were better, but because they advocated harder. Now, that's obviously not what real pay for performance is. It's probably more akin to pay for proximity. But here's where we part ways on this debate. Because the opposition, these guys, are going to make an argument that relies on you believing that merit-based pay is pay for performance. All of it. And it isn't, not even close. Pay for performance is a spectrum, and the version that they're going to attack is one narrow, admittedly messy slice of it. What about equity that vests based on company or tenure? That's pay for performance. What about profit sharing tied to team or business outcomes? Pay for performance. Sales compensation, where targets are defined up front and payouts are formulaic, pay for performance. Spot bonuses for exceptional project delivery, pay for performance. Even the decision to promote someone into a higher band based on a track record of contribution is by definition pay for performance. So when the opposition says that pay for performance doesn't work, what they need you to believe is that none of these mechanisms work, not just the broken one, all of them. And that's a very different argument. So let's look at the positive case for pay for performance. The first reality is the talent market. We all know we operate in a competitive economy. If any company in your market, any one of them, is rewarding performance through equity, through bonuses, through accelerated career progression, through above market offers to their best people, then you are competing with that, whether you like it or not. You are absolutely free to pay everyone the same. No one is stopping you. But the talent market doesn't care about your compensation philosophy. It cares about what your best people can get elsewhere. And if the answer is more because someone else recognizes their contribution, then they will eventually leave. Not all of them, not immediately, but the ones that you can least afford to lose often have the most options. The second point I want to get to is the sorting effect. And this matters more than most people think. Pay for performance doesn't just motivate the people you already have, although it can. More importantly, it signals. It tells high performers that this is an organization that will recognize what they bring, and it tells lower performers that contribution matters here. Over time, that sorting is how you build organizational capability. Companies that ignore performance in pay don't just fail to motivate, they get adverse selection. The best people leave and the most comfortable people stay. And that's not how you build anything worth building. There's one more point I want to get to before I hand over because I think it's underrated. Pay for performance forces you to define what good looks like. It forces the conversation for the company. What does high performance actually mean in this role? What does it look like? How do we know when we see it? Companies that avoid pay for performance often do so because they can't answer those questions or won't. And I'd argue that it's not a principal position, it's avoidance. Here's the thing that should concern you. Even in a flat pay structure, managers are still making performance judgments every single day. They're deciding who gets the interesting project, who gets face time with leadership, who gets developed, and who gets managed out. Those are all performance-based decisions. They're just invisible, unstructured, and uncontestable. Pay for performance doesn't create performance evaluation. It just makes it visible. It makes it something you can look at and challenge and improve. Now, without it, bias still exists. You've just removed the mechanism that makes it possible to actually spot. So let me bring this back to the opposition. If you reject pay for performance, you're not just rejecting the broken version, the one we've already agreed is flawed. You're rejecting equity tied to contribution, profit sharing, sales compensation, promotion-based pay progression, market competitive offers that recognize what your best people are worth. The alternative isn't a neutral, fair system. It's a system that still has performance differences, every organization does, but it's chosen to pretend they don't exist, and the cost of that pretending is real. Your highest performers will leave for organizations that recognize them through any of these mechanisms, and the people who are most comfortable in a flat structure tend to be the ones with the least to prove, which is exactly what this bunch of hippies over here would love. The opposition doesn't just have to argue that merit-based pay is broken. We've already given them that. They have to...
It's live. Everyone's in the chat. We're back.
We're back. Kim, you're taking it off to jump into your side. Go for it.
You know, I really feel like this was a plot against me by Matt. He did such a horrific job. Look, Matt makes some great points. I hope other folks can hear me, but obviously there are various types of pay for performance structures. Sure, equity, that startup equity is going to be worth so much money one day, like we're all promised. What our team cares about is the cash in their pocket on that every paycheck basis. So let's first start by being clear about what my team is not arguing. We're not arguing against fair pay. We're not arguing against rewarding people who work hard. And we are absolutely not arguing that low performance should be ignored. Healthy organizations must recognize effort. They need to reward contributions. And obviously, we're managing performance, high performance and low performance. What we're arguing against is individual pay for individual performance. For over 50 years, we've been led to believe that this pay for performance is the golden goose of compensation strategies. The idea, if we just tie people's pay tightly enough to their individual output, will unlock motivation, will reward the best employees, will drive long-term business success. And as easy and as elegant that sounds, it's a complete farce. Let's start with a critical assumption. And Matt, thank you for addressing this up front, that this entire strategy rests on your profit sharing, your equity bumps, that organizations can accurately and fairly measure individual performance. If that assumption fails, the entire model collapses. Because if we cannot measure performance fairly and objectively, we are not paying for performance, we're paying for the perception of performance. So if this system actually worked, the people designing it should believe in it, right? But they don't. As of 2024, Gallup reported that only 2% of Fortune 500 CHROs strongly agree their performance management systems inspire high performance. And employees feel the same way as practitioners. In the last 3 years, BetterWorks found that less than a third of employees believe their performance review programs are fair and equitable. Deloitte reported that 72% of employees don't even trust their organization's performance management. And Gallup found that 1 in 5 employees believe their performance management system doesn't believe it even works. And frankly, our employees are right to distrust these programs. My dear audience members, consider your own internal processes or the processes you have participated in. Think about how much time and effort organizations spend mitigating bias and driving alignment through things like manager training that's held right before reviews kick off, cajoling team members to submit 360 feedback, spending hours debating ratings and calibration meetings, all because evaluating performance accurately and fairly is incredibly difficult in the world of work today. Nearly 60% of today's workforce is considered knowledge workers. These folks aren't making widgets or putting together parts on an assembly line. Their work is complex, it's creative, and it is deeply collaborative. It's not transactional, it's not easily measurable, and in highly collaborative environments, it isn't even individual. When 5 people contribute to solving a problem, when ideas evolve across teams, when outcomes emerge from collaboration, how exactly are we isolating an individual's performance with enough precision to determine their pay? And the honest answer is we can't, at least with not enough precision to determine what they're taking home in their pocket every other week. Yet despite that reality, so many organizations today insist they can fairly do it. And I would argue that my dear colleagues today are going to make that same argument. And, they will be in good company. Most companies today take a pay for performance approach, and they have been for about 50 years now. So this should give us enough data to ask a very natural question. If pay for performance truly rewards the highest performers, we should see that reflected in pay outcomes, but we don't. As of 2024, the US gender pay gap is about 17%, and our Bureau of Labor Statistics found in every industry tracked, men made more than women. For our friends down in Australia, you've got a 20% gender pay gap that you're dealing with. And for our pals over in the EU, it sits at about 13%. Of course, as we add more filters beyond gender, like race or other demographics, we see pay gaps continue to widen, even when correcting for role in industry. But look, you don't need government data or fancy reports to discover this. Most of us can look internally at our own organizations, at our own pay practices, and do our own equity studies and find similar disparities. Which raises a simple question. If pay for performance actually worked, wouldn't we be seeing different results right now? Shouldn't pay gaps across the globe be shrinking, not persisting, and certainly not growing year after year? Or are we really meant to believe that white men just happy to be the highest performers literally everywhere? Or, dear audience, are we just beholden to a system that distorts behavior, erodes trust, and amplifies inequality, all under the guise of motivating performance? Looking at today's landscape, it's clear that paying for individual performance isn't delivering outcomes it promises, not fairness, not trust, not better performance, which means we should be asking a different question entirely. What actually motivates people to do great work? And my teammates and colleagues today are going to explore that exactly, why separating performance from compensation creates the conditions that organizations actually need, environments with more trust, more innovation, and ultimately stronger business results. I yield my time.
Perfectly on time as well. So thank you, Kim, for your opening arguments. I think we're going to jump into counter arguments now. We're bringing on Mark Frein. He's got 6 minutes to poke holes in all those stats you just served us. So take it away, Mark.
Well, so when Mr. McFarlane asked me to come, he knew he was getting a philosopher, and I'm wearing a shirt that has my hero, Ludwig Wittgenstein, who was a 20th century analytic philosopher and ethicist for what it's worth, to channel his impeccably insightful philosophical edge here. And I'm going to go philosophical on this a little bit as my way of responding to Kim's argument. So I'm going to give credit to the opposing team and Kim for defending what effectively is an ultimately undefensible position, at least if we want to live in a free market. So I'm taking for granted that the opposing team accepts that we live in free markets and they want to continue to do so. This debate would get very interesting very quickly if we're debating whether or not we ought to live in a state-controlled market reality like a dictatorship or an oligarchy. I can't imagine, knowing a couple of these people, that that's what they're actually asking us to consider. I vote for free markets. So imagine, if you will, if you went to the hairstylist and they bowl cut each and every one of us all the time. You paid the same fee for that bowl cut, no room for negotiation or choice. You know, if you like pastries, you went to buy a specialty cake and each time you got a carrot cake with garlic cream icing on it. Again, no choice. Carrot cake, garlic cream cheese every single time. I don't want to live in that particular, pastry serving reality. So, or if you are a small business employer and you run a lawn cutting business, for example, one of your people, let's call her Jane, consistently cuts lawns with amazingly satisfied customers, clearing 10 lawns per day. The other, let's call him John, has unhappy customers and only cuts 5 lawns per day. If we dismiss John for lack of performance, we are operating in a free market pay-for-performance system. Otherwise, we are operating in an environment where for one reason or another, we are unable to make such a decision. If, for example, and I'm glad you mentioned this, Kim, we continue to pay John the same because he's a man and don't fire him because he can't do his job. Or we continue to pay John because he's been in that business for a long time, longer than Jane. I don't want to work in that environment. Jane certainly doesn't want to work in that environment. I expect y'all on this call don't want to work in that environment either. Not paying for performance ultimately means there's no means to differentiate in free market ways between goods, services, and talent. Pay for performance does not apply to compensation systems in large corporate bureaucracies like we all work. We often get it wrong in those environments, which my able team captain conceded at the very beginning. But paying for performance is a fundamental tenet of a free market. I get to choose how to spend my money on goods and services and vote with my dollars for my needs and wants being met or unmet. Now, I acknowledge that there are certain situations in our democratic societies where worker protections, such as unions, establish strict guidelines for how pay decisions are made. But unions are not actually anti-performance per se. They just want to protect workers from poor management by ensuring that even in union environments, merit-based pay structures are applied fairly and consistently. We can all agree for that. Paying fairly for performance is the objective here, not moving to a system that eliminates customer, employer, and employee freedoms. Thank you very much. I know I'm a little early. I can do a dance or sing or whatever else, but I'm happy to hand on my time to the next person because I just dropped the mic.
Wow, dropped the mic. I definitely do not want a bowl cut, so I don't know what that's about that, but I like it. I like where you're coming from. A bit of economics there hitting us. We're going to the opposition now. We've got against team. We've got Kim Rohrer. You're up. You've got 6 minutes to hit back if you want to choose to use it.
The opportunity to hit back at my former boss. I love it. Nice work, Mark, Matt. Really, very polished, very confident, very demure, very mindful, etc., etc. But you're wrong. While your arguments might sound reasonable, they just aren't true. And I say this with love. We have been going back and forth on LinkedIn for weeks. It has been fun roasting your cute little faces behind the screen. But here, virtually IRL, in front of hundreds of our peers, it is time to settle this once and for all. Fellow exhausted HR leaders, people who just came to watch a nerdy fight, here's what my opponents got right. Performance matters. Because of course it does. Without performance, there is no business, there is no company, no jobs, no people to care about. I am not arguing that. Nobody on my team is arguing that. But what they conveniently left out in their argument for meritocracy, besides all the bias and shit, is what actually happens to the person on the other side of that performance conversation when they know the outcome is tied to their pay. I'm talking about the person doing the math in their head, the one who's trying to look engaged while they're quietly calculating whether their feedback means their bonus is safe, the one who has a genuinely great idea but knows that chasing it might take them off the path that historically has led to a raise. That person is not performing better because of pay for performance. They are surviving despite it. I know we keep saying this, but somehow it just keeps being true that we are living in unprecedented times. We have economic instability, constant organizational change, a workforce being asked to innovate faster, adapt quicker, do more with less, train the AI to take over your job, and somehow stay motivated while you're at it. In that environment, compensation isn't just a number. It is the foundation of psychological safety. And you do not get innovation or risk-taking or any kind of performance that actually increases business success without psychological safety. Okay, you want some research? I got research. Before I was in HR, I was an archival librarian and aspiring dramaturg. I have got you. In the 1960s, Sam Glucksberg gave two groups of people a creative puzzle. Don't ask, it involved a candle, a matchbook, and a box of thumbtacks. In his experiment, one group of participants would get a large cash bonus for solving the problem fast. The other would get nothing. And guess what? The cash group took longer every single time. The reward did not sharpen their thinking. It cauterized it. They lost their ability to think outside the literal box. Thank you. They stopped solving the problem when they chased the prize. But that's not all. In the early aughts, Dan Ariely stress tested this experiment with bigger bonuses, different tasks, different countries. He even ran it in rural India, where the largest bonuses on offer were worth several months of wages. Same results. The more money on the line, the worse the thinking got. This is over 60 years of research. For work that requires actual human thought, which is what we're talking about with this debate, tying pay to performance actually weakens your output. And to bring it back to the painful experience your employees are facing when you have a pay-for-performance model, even when the feedback is good, the recipient cannot hear you if their comp is riding on that conversation. They aren't present, they're calculating, they're managing their face, they're not listening because they're planning their negotiation. I'd like to close with a story. In my first VP of People role 1.5 million years ago, I wanted to do things differently. This was the great fuck it, let's blow up the old ways of doing HR era of startups in the early 2010s, when many of us just decided we didn't want to perpetuate broken systems and we were going to make shit up ourselves. So I started out big. I proposed that we separate the two entirely, doing some sort of isolated compensation analysis that frankly I was not experienced enough to be proposing and wasn't prepared to enact. Unsurprisingly, my CEO was not convinced. But we started small, breaking up the standard combined semi-annual review cycle into 2 separate conversations. We still held formal performance conversations twice a year to talk about career growth, skill gaps, what the business needed. But then a month later, separate conversation, separate headspace, we ran a comp review and calibration. We used market data, role, level, equity, cost of living, whatever other data we had available. Performance was just one input among many. But importantly, performance wasn't the only thing in the room. And perhaps even more importantly, money wasn't in the room when we discussed performance. When we moved away from the historically shitty performance review with comp tacked on at the end model, everything changed. Managers showed up better. Employees actually listened to feedback. Performance improved. Executives made cleaner budget decisions because they weren't emotionally compromised by a hard review they had just sat through. So when I tell you this works, I'm not speaking theoretically. I have been there. Years later, I found myself replicating a similar philosophical approach at Oyster, curiously in partnership with Mr. McFarlane and under the direction of Mr. Frein. In fact, we deliberately built a system where performance wasn't the primary driver of pay. Did performance still influence pay? Of course. As my colleague Ms. Minnick already established, healthy organizations absolutely must recognize effort and manage performance. We are not disputing that. But the old systems aren't working, and modern people leaders know that there is a better way. I'm just a girl standing in front of you asking you to think about an ideal future in a less than ideal current state. I know this is complicated. No system is perfect, but I hope that you will leave here today and take one small step towards building a more equitable world of work. Thank you.
Oh, wow. That was a wonderful ending statement. I love it. And I really, really interesting what we've got going on here, guys. Make sure we don't forget to vote. If you are convinced, you can vote now. If you're not sure, wait till the end. You will have some time at the end because we're about to go into round 3, which is the rebuttal. We're going to have up next, coming from the for side, we've got Jessica Zwaan. She's going to take control of the microphone now, and she's going to hopefully dish out some really interesting facts and information that we can be convinced or not on pay for performance. Take it away, Jessie. I was going to say Jessica, but then I stopped and said exactly what we said was going to happen. And now you've got 6 minutes. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to start. Thank you so much for the opposition. You've done a really, really wonderful job today. I think it takes a lot of gumption to stand up in front of hundreds of fellow professionals and argue against paying people for the work they actually do. I think that takes a lot of commitment. I really respect that you guys have done that. But I'm going to have to be honest with you. What we've heard today from the opposition, I mean, let's be honest, it really isn't an argument against pay for performance, is it? There's a list of complaints about bad managers and HR teams, if we're real. And to be honest, I share actually every single one of those complaints. I think all of you have watched me on LinkedIn, and I've spent my entire career fixating on exactly those problems. But that's not what's on the table today, guys. Remember, the motion is pay for performance effective, not does it work perfectly? We are asking if it worked perfectly, I think we'd all just vote no and go home, and I could have a nice glass of wine because it's getting late in the UK. The motion's about whether it's essential. So on that question, the opposition actually, I think, Matt, Mark, I think they've been pretty quiet, actually. So I'm going to try and focus my rebuttal on what I've found here. But in fact, Kim R. opened her argument with the words, and I'm actually quoting directly, I've been making notes, performance matters, of course it does. Without it, there is no job. And I want to thank you for that, because that is actually our essential argument. You've made our case for us, actually. If performance is so fundamental that without it, there is no job, then of course it should be reflected in pay, right? The only question is about, like, honestly, how are we going to do it? And I'm going to reference you too, Kim. You're not the only other Kim that's here. You also tried to narrow our motion. By the end of your argument, you weren't even really arguing against pay for performance. You were just arguing against individual performance metrics specifically, which I understand they're muddy. You've already conceded commission, equity, profit sharing. Why not? Team bonuses. Let's just concede Matt's actual entire opening argument. And rather, let's be precise about what the opposition are actually defending. A world in which individual contribution carries no weight to your pay. Not your commission, not your equity, just your specific output shouldn't matter. Well, I'll let you decide how that sits. And then there's actually the moment I was waiting for, where Kim pointed out that women and non-white employees are consistently among the strongest performers in organizations. And you're right. That's actually very well documented in research. But let's all together follow that logic, because I think it actually lands somewhere that I think is very important. If historically marginalized groups are consistently high performers, and I think we all agree that research says they are, then they've been consistently underpaid relative to their output, their performance, and they have, right? And then the problem for me is not actually if we're differentiating pay based on performance. The problem is that we haven't been doing it very well. The answer is underpaying high performers is to pay them what they're worth, not to stop differentiating. So if pay for a performance was applied fairly, then the single most powerful mechanism we could have towards those employees that are being treated unfairly is actually to make the case to do it better. All right. Anyway, let's move on to the research, because we've all cited it. And I think it deserves a proper answer rather than dismissal, right? There's been a couple of studies that were mentioned around bonuses, high stakes, worse performance, yada, yada, yada. We all heard them. And we know that extrinsic reward crowds our intrinsic motivations. It kind of blocks our ability to do things effectively. These are real findings. I'm actually not going to pretend that they aren't. But what I will say about those studies is what they actually show is that in controlled lab conditions, with isolated cognitive tests under extremely short periods of time and cash incentives, can impair creative problem solving. Now, I'm not a scientist, but that's not my job, actually. It was never actually intended to be finding out whether high-performing people at employment-based work are low-performing over a course of maybe a year or two. They're actually completely different questions with completely different variables and require completely different lab situations. It's like kind of using a 1960s experiment to figure out whether a wind tunnel should figure out if cars shouldn't have windows. It's just not, doesn't make sense. The variables are completely different. They're actually so incomparable that's, no offense, Kim, kind of nonsense. Right. My last argument here, which I think I'd like to settle the debate, if that's okay, Jessie, before we move on to James, is what I think is you've missed is the incentive effect is not the point. The point is the sorting effect, which Matt mentioned earlier. Even if pay for performance doesn't change how your employees behave, even if that mechanism does precisely nothing, what it also does on top of that is determines who walks through your door and who stays. Companies that recognize and reward high performers and attract high performers over time, that compounds. Your best people always have options, and you'll always have employers that see them, even if you choose not to. What you're left with, if you strip out pay differentiation in an open market economy, as Mark, my colleague here, mentioned, is actually not a harmonious and equitable workforce. It's everyone that couldn't get better offers elsewhere, unfortunately. That's just adverse selection. So let me close with this. We're not debating the world we wish it was. I mean, I would love that. Let's do that, guys. A debate. What's our dream HR world? What we're debating today is the world that we are in, right? It's a competitive talent market. It moves quickly. It doesn't pause for our philosophical objections. Making the market fairer requires engaging with it honestly. It requires us to really define what good looks like. It requires us to measure it fairly as we can, and reward it transparently. The opposition today, as far as I'm aware, haven't offered you an alternative. What they've showed you is a broken implementation problem with a bunch of bad management and asked you to condemn an idea on an old system that isn't working perfectly. Don't let them do that. A bad haircut, and Mark did also open with haircuts today, so I thought I'd throw that in. It's not an argument against scissors, right? Pay for performance isn't perfect. No one in our team ever claimed it was, but it's the only mechanism we have that forces an organization to answer the question every single company I've ever worked at has to eventually answer, which is what does good look like here, and how do we make sure the right people are given the fair shot at doing their best job?
You're up.
Without that, you don't have questions. Okay, thank you. Vote for our motion.
Fantastic. I love hearing these arguments coming out. This is getting spicy. We're getting some real interesting things coming through as well. I think people are convinced maybe one way or the other. I don't know. We currently have quite a lot of votes on the for side. So if you're on the other side, make sure you don't forget to vote. We're going to move on now to our final round 3 rebuttal from the against side. This is going to be from our expert, James. He's got 6 minutes. You've got all the pressure now. Go for it.
Okay, wow. Well, there's a lot that's been. I'm going to try and rebut as much of this as I can. So I'm going to start by saying that individual pay for individual performance works. It's fairly simple. If you offer to pay someone for something that they can do, yes, they are more likely to do that thing. But the research consistently tells us that it works in the narrowest possible sense when tasks are simple and measurable and clearly defined. And it comes with the side effects that we've talked about. And beyond that boundary, the evidence really does just completely fall apart. And the problem is that kind of simple, measurable, volume-based work describes a shrinking fraction of the modern workforce. And as Kim mentioned, most of the people in organizations are knowledge workers solving abstract, unpredictable, loosely defined problems in collaboration with their peers. And in those scenarios, I have yet to see an organization that can define individual performance in a way that is fair, unbiased, and consistently applied. And you heard the numbers from Kim. Neither the practitioners nor the employees believe that performance management works. What we do see is gaming, favoritism, and bias, and the pay gap data confirms that. Now, the response that you've heard is that we just need to measure individual performance better. Or as Matt said, the right kind of performance. Well, we've been trying that for decades now. Billions of dollars have been spent on performance management systems, calibration processes, competency frameworks, 9 boxes, force distribution curves. And as you've seen, it still doesn't work. Meanwhile, the work is becoming more abstract, more collaborative, and more dependent on collective problem solving. Isolating individual contribution is getting harder, not easier. Now, Mark mentioned the free market and made a strong business case, but the fact is that the things that matter most for long-term business success are fundamentally immeasurable at the individual level. Innovation does not happen inside individual performance goals. It happens when a group of people feel safe enough to experiment, when they have the autonomy to chase a problem, and when ideas can flourish within the team. These conditions defy individual allocation because innovation itself is a collective and unpredictable phenomenon. We figure things out together, not through relentless internal competition. And here's the thing that concerns me the most and should concern everyone listening today, given the current pace of change. The real existential threat facing organizations today is not a productivity shortfall or free riders or even access to the full talent market. It is irrelevance. The biggest threat to current businesses is the inability to sense and respond to shifts in the market and to adapt when the landscape changes beneath them. The most effective defense against that threat is an engaged, innovative workforce that can move quickly together. Now, Kodak, for example, dominated the photography industry for a century and then filed for bankruptcy in 2012 because they actively suppressed their own innovation, the digital camera, to grow existing revenue. Kodak became irrelevant. BlackBerry had almost half of the US smartphone market in 2009, and within 4 years ceased to exist because it failed to innovate. It became irrelevant. Neither company would have solved their issues with pay for performance. No amount of incentive would have persuaded their customers to keep buying inferior products. What both companies lacked was the ability to innovate, adapt, and move forward as a team. Now, Kim already walked you through the Glucksberg and Ariely research, but I want to repeat that point and clarify. These weren't lab findings, as Jessie pointed out. These are real-world problems with real people with real money. This is not theoretical anymore. And it's also been studied at scale by Sarasota, Nicklin, and Ford to prove that these extrinsic incentives do in the real world, across many different industries, crowd out intrinsic motivation, the very motivation that we need to drive performance. So for work requiring ingenuity rather than effort, individual financial incentives degrade the quality of thinking. They don't improve it. Individualized pay for individualized performance is demonstrably undermining the type of thinking that we depend on for survival. Now, pay matters enormously. It has to be transparent and it has to be fair. And when it isn't, people disengage and people leave. But pay cannot motivate the behaviors that we need for organizational success and survival. As Matt said about signals, pay sends signals and they're just the wrong signals. Fortunately, from self-determination theory and decades of extensive research, we know exactly what does motivate workers to perform better in this regard. It is autonomy, giving people the space to figure things out. It is purpose, connecting their work to progress in something that matters. And it is mastery, letting people grow and stretch beyond what they've done before. It is not coercing and manipulating and dangling carrots in front of people with goals and incentives to try and steer people towards what you think yesterday is the right thing to do, because we don't know what the challenges are going to be of the future. So pay for performance does work, and that is exactly the problem. It works so reliably at shaping behavior that we've just not stopped to ask whether it's driving the business results we need. I'll yield my time. Thank you.
Oh, wow. So we have some strong rebuttal coming in here now, quite hot. I don't know what everyone's thinking, but I'm feeling like 1 minute I'm on the for, 1 minute I'm on the against side. So I don't know where to go from here. We still need to have our closing statements to convince everyone. We're going to run straight into closing statements from, firstly, Kim's team, the against team. She's got, my other timer's going off. We have 2 minutes. Kim, give it your best shot and we'll see where we land. Currently it's Jessie, 70 for the for team, and 30% for the against team. So you need to convince another 20% swing, at least.
Jessie, thank you so much. I appreciate your fantastic moderation here. My opponents want us to keep us down this capitalistic hellscape trap of an economy that we have set up for ourselves, where we are constantly laser focused on OKRs, limiting our ability to creatively solve problems, limiting our ability to innovate, limiting our ability to take time back. How many of you out there chasing your next performance increase notice your hours tick up above 40, 45, 50, 60? If you've got a life outside of work, just because you are a caregiver, because you are pursuing arts or crafts or education, you are therefore, your company doesn't care. They're going to call you a low performer and they are going to impact your take-home pay. Whereas if we went to exactly what my colleague James was saying, a more transparent system, a point-based system where folks can know exactly what they're required, have the space to innovate, have the space to creatively problem solve, and then go home at the end of 40 hours. If you do your job in less, let's reward you with time. Let's get a little bit more innovative than holding the carrot in front of you and slapping you with that stick when you don't perform. Oh, and by the way, check out your retention rates. Your high performers aren't being at a higher retention rate. They're at the same attrition rate as everyone else. I yield my time.
Oh, closing with 30 seconds. That's bold. Okay, well, everyone, I don't know. If you're convinced, you've got to be voting. We've got to see who wins this. I'm super excited to see if we can swing it any further. We've got Matt. You've got to close out. You've got 2 minutes as well. Take it away.
I mean, Jessie, I know I've got 2 minutes. I'm prepared to use half of it and give a minute of silence to the opposition here. Look, are there companies doing pay for performance wrong at an individual level? Sure, we've talked about that. You guys have talked about that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't work to get it right. And there are ways to do it. I mentioned a bunch of them. And it's all well and good to quote studies like my dear opposition have, but let's be real. The lab nerds that do these things don't work in the messy reality of work where we live. So we might not love elements of the market for talent, but we have to live in it. Ultimately, and I'm going to use Kim's words against her again, she said it herself, performance matters and you should be paid for it. So if you're for mediocrity, vote against pay for performance. But if you're for people being financially recognized for the outcomes they deliver, whether as individuals or as a collective, vote for pay for performance. Thank you very much.
Wow, closing with 1 minute left. Gosh, Matt, you must feel confident. That's goodness me. So what we've got now is we have some time for questions. So we're going to pick out a couple of questions in the crowd. If you've got any that you want to drop, please do. We've got a 30-second delay. So in the meantime, if any of you want to drop anything else, you can. We're waiting for any questions to come through. But in the meantime, everyone should be thinking about who they're voting for. Make sure you don't leave this chat without clicking whether you're for or against. We need to know who the winners are. If we leave this without every single vote we could possibly get, we'll be very sad because we can't let the team against lose so badly. No.
Hang on, what? Hang on a minute.
I was like, should I say that?
I love our moderator getting swayed during the debate.
Thank you.
We thought she was right, but now it's confirmed.
I'm
she
just
took
saying
a bribe.
that's
Obviously
crazy.
took a bribe.
At the moment,
My own countrymen.
4:36. We've had a bit of a swing. It was 7:30.
Here I was thinking we were just going to play some elevator music while we waited for the questions to come through, but no.
There's
She's like, here's how I voted, everyone.
Okay, we got any questions? How many people are voting for pay for performance are just afraid to try new things and imagine things differently? That's interesting, some of the comments here. None of the arguments have accounted for when someone else takes credit for other people's work. Well, yeah, that's true.
Truth.
There's always a what about. Do we remove currency because people rob banks sometimes?
Here.
I'm
Damn
saying.
it.
Oh, goodness. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any questions. So that's, or at least it's very hard to go through this chat and find
people
any.
are convinced.
I think they're all convinced. We've got 64-36 right now, and we've
I'm impressed there's 36% on
Yeah, he's good, you guys.
and I don't mean that in the negative way. I mean that good work. Good work.
There are people who are ready to try something new, that are tired of spending hours upon hours upon hours after they're 40 chasing that performance bump. Like, shout out to that 36%, I think you said. I'm here for it. Let's try new things.
That's right.
And I think people are actually rather talking about the fact they can't. Maybe I should have had a third option, which was not sure, or it's not about pay for. It's not about the pay.
We don't
about
want fence sitters
performance.
here.
Everyone's
People
rather
need to
saying
choose.
it's about.
You can't sit on the fence. We need.
They're all sitting. Everyone's sitting on the fence.
What I am kind of interested in, while we've got a few seconds, is like a couple of people have asked, and I do think that this is kind of an interesting question to think about now that you guys have lost. But one of the questions is, do you just stop annual pay performance? Like, is the alternative here that like every year everyone's salary just gets raised by inflation, even new joiners? Because tenure is performance. So like, what's the alternative we're thinking here?
I mean, why not pay everyone a similar increase or the same increase? Why not base it on cost of living? Why not base it on company performance, not individual? If your company has money, give it back to your employees.
Okay.
There are also a lot of companies in the world that do this already. Like in North America, it's not common, but there are a lot of companies in the world that do just pay everyone in the same role the same thing and have much flatter pay structures than in the US. Part of the problem with the US is that it's so stretched. Like the higher and lower levels of pay are so stretched. You have to get promoted, you have to get merit, otherwise you can't meaningfully increase your pay. But there are plenty of companies in the world that just pay every single person, every job, the same amount, and it takes away a ton of the issues.
Interesting.
I am genuinely curious as to what our colleagues, how you would think about promotionality in a non-pay-for-performance world.
Well, I'm going to address that because promotions, right? So first of all, that's about what the business needs, not what the person's capable of. The first thing with a promotion is always, well, what is this empty role that someone needs to be promoted into? But we've turned promotion basically into an economic event. So everyone chases promotions because if you don't get promotions, you cannot meaningfully increase your pay. You will never be able to send your kids to school or buy your own house in North America unless you keep getting promotions. So the idea of actual progress and mastery and development has been completely replaced by the economic argument for getting more money. So one of the problems with that is we need to flatten pay much more across the organization. We need to chop executive pay. We need to increase the floor. We need to reduce the necessity to get promotions. But the other piece is that once you do that, then it genuinely does become about people looking for new challenges. So right now, you've got people in managerial positions have no interest of being managers just because they wanted the money that came with the promotion. And that perpetuates the problem of poor performance management because you have people there because of the money and not because of the ambition. So I think when you start flapping pay and taking pay out of it, then you start actually focusing on promotions that matter, not just because they're in it for the money.
Interesting. This all just brings me back to like group assignments at school where like someone does all the work and then like, one person gets the credit and you're like, that wasn't fair. And then you never want to do a group assignment ever again. But then the things you say, I'm also like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, so there's like elements to both sides, I think, is what I'm feeling. That's why I can feel why everyone's kind of sitting on the fence, right?
The fairness piece, though, right? You can't fix that with money, though. You're right. It's absolutely unfair when there are people not pulling their weight and the people are up. But you don't fix that with money. If someone's not working, paying them 80% of their target bonus is not going to change that behavior. It's just going to sit on that money and keep not pulling their weight. The way to make it fair is to create team accountability and trust within that group of people. It's when you don't trust one another, when you're constantly competing each other, like this sort of Jack Welchian style vitality curve mentality, that's when you get people not pulling their weight. And again, studies show this. People who are branded low performers actually perform worse. It's a psychological effect. If you're told you're not a good performer, you increase the chance of being a bad performer just by knowing that you're not the top of the group. So by treating everyone as potentially really, really good performers, which everyone is because they're all humans, then you actually get rid of some of that. It's just the idea of individual attribution is quite pervasive in organizational thinking.
As Matt and Kim know, I could have gone on either side of this argument, frankly, but the one thing I would think would be very difficult to sustain is that system you're describing, James, in a free market where other companies are choosing to do it differently, because it creates it's difficult to orchestrate that where even if that system could work, and I think it very well might, it's difficult to have it be in a marketplace system where other companies are continuing to pay for performance, because people who are monetarily incentivized will move to places where they can make more money.
I disagree. I think if there were more opportunities where folks could look, we see burnout rates have drastically increased as more companies have moved towards an individual pay for individual performance model. We don't see that big argument that was made was, oh, this is how we keep our high performers, but their attrition rates are no different than other levels of performance. So folks, again, they are chasing that money, and sure, they might get the 1 or 2% raise, but it's at a cost of burnout, of lack of, building a social life outside of work, building community outside of work. And it's because capitalism, right?
Well, interesting. I would say I love the idea that there are more companies that embrace, well, let's call it a flat pay structure or a more flat pay structure. It's difficult to imagine a situation where some people will select for that and some people will select for a more aggressive pay structure, which might be completely okay. You're just going to have, ultimately, you're going to have a place where different people choose on the basis of where they want to be employed, how they're compensated. So I can get behind that, Kim and team.
But and your point about the selection and the market performance and capitalism's still going to exist. But again, I want a company that's going to bring me the best ideas as quickly as possible. I don't want a company where someone's afraid to share their idea, as Kim pointed out, because they're chasing a bonus or because they don't believe they're a good performer, therefore don't pursue an idea that might ultimately save my organization. If you systematically look at all the companies that have ceased to exist, it's because they failed to innovate. they didn't have enough good ideas. Meanwhile, you look at the companies that have lasted the longest, like Google's the best example, consistently had 20% time, which they borrowed from 3M, to enable ideas to grow, and avoided just pushing people towards more and more and more volume. That's where we got Google Maps. That's where we got Google Ads. That's where we got Gmail. These ideas came from people who had a little bit of free time on their hands because they knew there was no point chasing their rating. If they were chasing a rating, they'd have used that free time to get whatever volume or activity it was that they were being measured on, but they didn't, so they get these products.
I can't imagine Google HR would say they don't pay for performance, though.
Well, yeah, and I will say that was a while ago. Google changed a little bit since then, but it's an
Google
example
was
of a
what
company
it
that
is.
managed to grow and stay big while also holding on to those values of innovation for quite a long time.
Okay, we seem to have shifted the percentage a little bit. So we've got 60-40 now, more or less, is the split. So
let's
we've
keep
moved up 10% on the against side. With this little,
I think we might
rounding
need
up.
another hour, James.
How many
I mean, we
percentage
could
points
keep
have I
going.
got per minute?
We've got 3 minutes.
I mean,
to go
we've
down.
already convinced our moderator, and we've already got Mark from the other team saying he could have argued our side. So vote with what you believe.
I'm clearing my calendar. Let's just keep going.
I'm still sitting on the fence. I think a couple of people are. Please put your
Guys,
votes in if you haven't. I believe
this is the
the
people's vote.
4 team has, in fact, won this debate based on the votes that we have today. We have 62-38. Congratulations, Team Matt. I mean, round of
Well
applause
done.
for all
Very
of you.
strong opposition. Thank you for joining us. This was very fun.
And again, thank you so much for all of you, the 6 of you. You've done fantastic. I really loved hearing from all your different perspectives. It was crazy interesting for me. And a huge thank you again to our sponsors, Pave, Pando, and Shapes, for making this happen. And of course, for everyone who joined, throw in your LinkedIn in the chat if you haven't already. Connect with others. Look out for the replay. Look out for the follow-up email where we have a little bit more information. And
Can I say thank you to David Gaspin, who just said this was the best HR thing ever to be on the internet.
Oh my
Hey.
goodness.
That's a
Crazy.
win for everyone.
That's a win
Crazy.
for us all.
That's a win for everyone. Even with the chat not working, the stream dropping out. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We're going to be signing off. Again, this has been fantastic. Have a great
Thank
evening.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.